Sir, we're a newly launched startup, sir, and we're looking for funding.
Tell me more.
We have an innovative idea that solves the problems of real.
Does it have AI?
Sir, we don't have AI.
Does it have blockchain?
Sir, I don't think it's a fit for us, sir.
C.
Sir. Varun Purti invested in a startup, sir.
Varun Purtiya? Which startup, man?
Yes, sir. They are selling milk, sir.
Milk, oh my god!
When I started off with YouTube, I was giving you guys purely advice. I was just like, hey, this is how you do things. But then over time with feedback, I realized I have to give you more pragmatic advice, which basically means here are my personal learnings, and this is an anecdote from my past that kind of puts this point that I'm telling you guys about in action. What I've realized is that millennials today are junk food seekers, which means that it's not just the kind of food we eat that's unhealthy, but also the kind of content we consume. We want junk food, quick, fast, entertaining, interesting, because our attention span is super low. So what I have to do is create content in a very entertaining way. It's like one of those dirty, greasy burgers, and then seal my valuable information and how to actually run a startup in between that. So I have to sandwich, really good content in between junk food. So that's the reason I did the skit in the beginning of this video. I don't mean to offend any venture capitalists with that skit, but the entire reason I did that skit was I want you guys to learn. So make sure you subscribe to my YouTube and follow me on Instagram, because who knows how I'll evolve as a content creator in the future. Not only do you get to absorb awesome startup content, you might also get to see me change as a content creator, because hey, I'm doing this for the first time just like some of you guys in the future. Now let's get back to the topic. I have been on both sides of the table, both as an entrepreneur who's gone out to raise funding and as an investor who's looked at several different, entrepreneurs' pitches and decks and so on and so forth. And one of the biggest dilemmas that I faced, when I got a deck for the first time was there was this one company, they were in the grocery space, they had a lot of data, they were doing $1 million annual recurring revenue, but I just didn't know if they were a good investment, right? I was just like, okay, I have the deck, their numbers seem to be good, but I needed some validation. Is there any other investor investing? I couldn't tell whether the startup was good, bad, or ugly. While Avalon's venture arm makes smaller investments than a traditional VC, we usually invest about $100,000 per company we enter. Sometimes we invest a little more than that. But the mechanics are similar. Before I did this video, I had a lot of candid conversations with many different venture capitalists across India. And, I asked them, what are the intricate challenges of your job, right? How do you actually judge a particular entrepreneur? How do you judge an investment, especially if it comes in cold and you have, a very short amount of time to make a decision? You see, what I realized was that most investors, as well as myself, we're genuinely confused about whether we like a startup or not. And even if we like a startup, we're genuinely confused about why we like that startup. See, one thing that's common between Avalon's investment wing and other investors is that we all want to bet on winning ideas. We want to engage with high-performing entrepreneurs in large market spaces who are going after big problems. The only thing is it's such a high-risk space, and there are so many variables that determine whether a startup succeeds or not. Simply because there are so many variables involved, an investor must actually use thumb rules, right? And by thumb rules, it means maybe there are a million variables involved in a startup's success. An investor has to say, look, I'm only looking for these 1, 2, 3 things that I think are thumb rules that can kind of tell me or give me some assurance that, hey, maybe these entrepreneurs or these founders are able to tackle the bigger subset of variables that are out to get them. Some of these thumb rules can be as simple as, is the founder a very driven person who's a visionary? Is the market big enough? What I've kind of realized is that most investors will decide internally whether an entrepreneur is a winner or a loser in the first 10 seconds of a conversation. And Avalon is no exception to this rule. We get sold within the first 5 to 10 seconds of our conversation with an entrepreneur. Not even 5 to 10 minutes. It's that first hello and the first, that's the entry slide or the slide deck that kind of decides, am I really interested in this, or should I just, kind of switch off for the next 15-20 minutes. That's how I think. I want to be respectful to every entrepreneur that pitches to Avalon. So does Shashank, my co-founder. But sometimes you just know there's no way in hell we would invest in a company. But as a respectful investor who's also sat on the other side of the table, we give the entrepreneur his 15 or 20 minutes, his or her 15 or 20 minutes to kind of display what they have. Even if we know in the first 10 seconds we will not invest in a company. The big problem is that once our mind is set on whether somebody's a winner or a loser, and the same thing with most venture capitalists, once a VC has set in his head whether a startup is a winner or a loser, it is very difficult to change their mind. So you have a very short window to convince a venture capitalist that you are a good fit. In the skit I did, I showed you an example of how an investor invests just because somebody else is investing. That validation from other investors, you might think that, hey, you know what? These venture capitalists are not so smart after all if they claim they do their own thing but look for validation from other investors. But the problem is at Avalon we do the same thing too. And if you somehow landed up with a lot of money or you were managing other people's money, you would do the same thing. It's a very human process to look for validation, especially when you're betting so much money. Remember I told you investors are looking for certain thumb rules? One of the strongest thumb rules or signals is another investor investing, which is why I always mention to most of the entrepreneurs that I work with, go get your first investor, get your lead investor who will lead the round, and then the rest of the investors will follow suit. It's not that hard once you get one person to bite. Also, one of the difference between Avalon and most other venture capitalists is that apart from the fact that we invest lesser money, this is also not our primary job, right? We don't manage other people's money. Whereas in the traditional venture capital world, these VCs are actually fund managers. They manage other people's money. So they have maybe 10 or 15 different limited partners who are people who put money in the VC and say, hey, you can go out and do a good job finding these companies. And when you're managing your own money, or in Avalon's case, when I make an investment decision, it's pretty much me and Shashank and a couple of other people on our board who were just like, okay, should we do this, should we not do this? And that's it, right? That's how we make our decision. Whereas with traditional VCs, it's other people's money, right? So they have to show and prove to those other people that, look, we're making the right investments. At Avalon, we've written off investments. Sometimes investments don't work out. It's okay. We swallow our own pride and we say, hey, we became better investors. But with venture capitalists, they have people to answer to, right? And typically those are lots of people. So a traditional VC's job and his own credibility as a venture capitalist is on the line. Whereas for us, our primary business is the services business and the products that we own. And the investing arm is something we do on the side because we're like, hey, maybe it makes sense to invest in a couple of companies that show promise and make sense in the Avalon network. Now I know there are a few VC friends of mine who've watched the first 10-20 seconds of the skit and are going, oh, that's not us. Well, obviously the skit was overly dramatized. And I am yet to meet a VC in all my interactions who has a fake accent. So obviously, take it with a grain of salt. Most people watching this, please do remember it is wired in our brain to seek validation. I do it. When you get rich, you will do it too. But in general, most venture capitalists I've met are smart people, right? You can't manage millions of dollars of other people's money if you're not smart. But at the same time, they are susceptible to the same biases that all of us are. As an entrepreneur, I've been doing this for more than a decade, right? And that experience kind of allows me to enter uncharted territory. I take a lot of risks that other entrepreneurs would be like, oh, that's probably a little risky for us. As an entrepreneur, I can pretty much confidently say that I don't care about what anybody else thinks, especially when I enter a market. If I believe something will work, I will go ahead and do it without seeking validation. But as an investor, I'm still very much a newbie. I've only been doing this for a year and a half. So I'm learning along the way. Hopefully, and my goal for myself is that over the next 5 to 10 years, I become good enough to be able to take risks that nobody else can take, right? I'm talking about massive financial risks in other entrepreneurs. But that day is yet to come, and hopefully we'll learn this together. Just like my evolution as a content creator, maybe my evolution as an investor is worth watching out for as well. Either I'll end up making really outrageous bets over the next decade, or I might just end up making a fool of myself. Either way, this time it's going to be televised. In this video, I'm going to go through 3 things that every venture capitalist looks for, and what's the best way you can pitch these 3 things while being cognizant of them. The first thing that an investor looks for is the target market. The biggest question on any investor's mind, including our minds, is how big is the market? So generally what happens is, after a year or 2 years into a startup's life cycle, a startup will generally stumble upon something called a cost of acquisition of customer. Then the startup will go to venture capitalists and say, look, we've kind of nailed our CAC, and the CAC is say 2,000 rupees per customer. And we're making 5,000 rupees off each of these customers that we acquire. So now the startup knows that its profit margin is 3,000 rupees. Then it's very easy for a startup to make a case for the VC and say, look, we make 3,000 rupees per customer. This is how we acquire them. Then the only math left to do for the investor is how many such customers can you tap? How many such customers can you reach? So as long as the difference between the revenue per customer and the cost of acquisition per customer is a positive one, then venture capitalists know that as long as they keep pumping in money, the company will continue to make more money, right? Then just, after your Series A, which is your first formal round of funding, it's just about throwing more money at the problem, acquiring more customers and scaling everything, right? And venture capitalists know this. But what generally happens is that there is a ceiling in every market. The difference between total addressable market and just the total market is addressable means you can actually reach out to these customers, whether it's through ads, whether it's through, a billboard, whether it's through, going out there right in front of them, it doesn't matter. The addressable market is what part of the total market can you actually tap and reach out to. There is not a single serious VC in the world who will invest in a target market or a total addressable market that is less than a few $1 billion in size. The bigger the market, the better. Remember, these folks want to put in big money and reap even bigger returns. I learned this the hard way. In early 2016, I made an investment in a company called Alpha Armor, which, it was run by a pretty smart entrepreneur who made gym apparel. And the way I was thinking was that, look, I would buy gym apparel because, I go to the gym once in a while. And, I'm pretty sure there are a lot of other people who'd want to buy this, these tank tops and these gym shoes and this zipper and so on and so forth. So I put money in that company. Not a lot of money. That was more like a personal investment. Now, the entrepreneur spent a year doing this and then came back to me with a simple conclusion. There are a very, very small number of people who are actually into elite fitness and bodybuilding in India. Even if we tapped and sold to every single one of them, we would still not make any reasonable amount of money. As a company, they had hit the ceiling of the market very quickly, within a year, and they just realized there's no more room to grow. Even if they put more money into acquisition and reached out through new channels, the people who were into serious bodybuilding was still a very, very small number. And I learned the hard way that if I don't look for a market that's really big, this business hits a ceiling and you will only end up making a few lakhs per year. The total addressable market or the revenue potential in the market can be easily calculated through a simple formula. The formula goes like this: the average revenue per user multiplied by the total number of users that are directly reachable or addressable through any form of marketing. The bigger the target addressable market, the more interest you will get from both venture capital investors as well as smaller funds like Avalon. We love investing in massive markets, especially massive markets that you can reach digitally instead of, going in front of them. One of the advantages we have over smaller angel investors or, venture funds is that we actually understand marketing very well. So we just open Google Trends or Facebook Audience Insights and see when an investment comes in, when a potential deal comes in, whether the target market is actually big enough so that you can reach these people on Facebook. The second thumb rule that a VC looks for is evidence. So fundamentally, there are two ways to present your evidence. A, through a story, and B, through actual data. What I've learned is that data is king. If you have solid evidence that your startup makes sense, that those three numbers that I spoke about make sense, the TAM, the cost of acquisition per customer, and the revenue per customer, those numbers make sense, nothing like it. But if you're an early stage startup, chances are you don't have those three things nailed down perfectly. But maybe you have one or two customers that are already using your product, that are already paying you for that product. 2 or 3 customer success stories. That forms a good story. You say, look, I've had 2 people, I don't know these numbers yet, and I'm trying to figure out these numbers. That's why I'm raising capital, right? But during this kind of graph, I've had this customer, I've had this customer, and this is a real need. And I'm also telling you that the market is big. And how you think there are millions or billions, preferably, of people across the world that you can help with the exact same solution that you've built. When I meet a lot of budding entrepreneurs, they come to me and they say, look, we have this product, it has feature 1, feature 2, feature 3, feature 4. Guys and girls, you need to face this. Venture capitalists don't particularly care about your features. because they know that the customers don't care about the features either. The benefits are basically what your product accomplishes. I mean, you can just pull out an iPod and say, hey, this allows you to carry thousands of songs along with you, right? Whereas when you're pitching features, what it sounds like is, hey, this thing has 4 GB of digital music storage, which venture capitalists don't really care about. It's the benefit that matters more. Whether you want to build a deck from a storytelling perspective or whether you want to build a deck from the data perspective, I have you covered in the next video. So don't forget to subscribe and follow me on Instagram, because I always keep putting out small bits of information that are useful that I might not cover in my videos. Imagine you come to me or any other venture capitalist and you say, look, I want millions of dollars and here's my deck. Think about if you had a lot of money. Say if you had $1 million with you and you had to invest this $1 million, and hundreds of entrepreneurs came to you on the first week and they said, you know, we want your money, we want your money. Chances are, if you're managing $1 million of another person's money, you would not make that decision instantly. You would think about it and you would say, okay, maybe I should invest in this entrepreneur. Oh, but maybe this guy's good as well. I only have a limited amount of money. So what you would do is you would build a relationship, right? It takes some amount of time until you get familiar with the entrepreneur, because it is possible that an entrepreneur comes, takes the 1 million and then never shows up again, right? So you want credibility, you want someone who's been there for a while. So you build a relationship. A pitch deck is the way to build a relationship with a venture capitalist. Now, if I was on the market raising capital, what I'd do is I'd first send a pitch deck or get an introduction and then send a pitch deck and then tell the venture capitalist, look, I'm not looking for money right now, but I want to build a relationship. Is it okay if I send you a bi-weekly report on everything that's going on in X company, right? And that's the right way to do things. You build a relationship and you find a way to send them an update every 2 or 3 weeks. Now, I want to talk about the third and the most important point in any venture capitalist book, right? This is the biggest and the most important thumb rule. I remember a quote from Vijay Shekhar Sharma where he was like, I don't invest in the bus or where it's headed. I invest in the bus driver. One of the things that we look for, and every top tier VC will look for, is grit, right? Grit, or Paul Graham calls this formidability. It basically means, is this guy or girl capable of getting anything he wants to or she wants to, despite all the obstacles in their way? Is this person a winner, or is this person going to quit? Venture capitalists do not invest in quitters. There are a lot of startups that fail and who've raised millions of dollars who failed, but chances are their founders have gone through many obstacles before they finally said, I quit, right? Startups are so hard and it is so easy to quit. But venture capitalists are looking for people who will not quit and who always get their way. A lot of you who want to start startups, and I've said this many times before, it is so hard. And it's not very hard when you have 1 or 2 people, but once you have a team of 40-50 people, if you miss one payment, you're basically screwed, and you're screwing the lives of 40 other people, right? At the same time that you're doing cold calls, you might have to clean the office. And these are all things that I've done, right? So it's a very tough situation to be in. And that's why venture capitalists look for people who have the grit. Another thing about good founders is that they understand their domain very well, which means that if it's a founder who's talking about medical technology, the founder needs to know that space very well, because in 1 or 2 questions, you can tell whether the founder is good at it or not. A personal experience is that before I started JobSpire, I knew nothing about recruitment. In fact, I didn't know what a notice period was until 6 months into my journey into JobSpire. And most venture capitalists that I met until then could tell, right? They could just be like, hey, you've never had a job before, you've not been exposed to this industry. And what I did was I went and I spoke to hundreds, maybe thousands of people who are both recruiting as well as looking for jobs, or have had jobs and bad scenarios of jobs before, just to absorb all that information. I became a domain expert without actually having to experience this, but that took me a lot of time. I believe that if I was out of college and I had to do all of that research, I just wouldn't have managed. I would have wasted months, right? So venture capitalists are expecting you to do your homework and know your industry inside out. Now, finally, I want to end this video with a little bit of advice. Many times a VC will come to you, or you will go to a VC and the VC will say no to you. This is classic rejection, right? This is a rejection game. Every 10 VCs you go to, nine of them are going to say no. Can you imagine that there were companies like Facebook and Google that venture capitalists have rejected? These went on to become huge companies. What I've started noticing is that there is a general trend for most VCs to be quite old, and I'm talking about 35 plus, which is not too old, but it's still old enough. And what generally happens is these guys are pretty much disconnected from most of what's happening in the millennial world. Imagine Snapchat Snapchat's target audience was kids, right? People like you and me and millennials and people under the age of 28 at maximum, but mostly to 16 and 17-year-olds. Most VCs did not touch Snapchat with a poll. They were like, disappearing pictures, that doesn't even make sense. We're going to stay away from it. So what I've realized is that, especially in India, most venture capitalists don't understand businesses that are directly focused towards millennials unless the VCs themselves become younger. So if an old VC says no to you, I think that you shouldn't worry about it too much. If you understand your market well and you are young, that's why I have so much hope in young people, right? Because when we're young, you are also the target audience. So you can see things that other people can't, right? I don't understand how the typical 15-year-old thinks. It's very difficult for me to know what is it that influences their daily lives today. Maybe 10 years ago when I was 15, I knew exactly how it worked. But I do not understand how the 15-year-olds today think. So while I'm not the best person to make a product for a 15-year-old, I am the best person to make a product for somebody between the ages of 20 to 30 because I understand that target market very well and I employ people in that age range too. So as a team, we understand that TG very well. But a VC who's a little bit older might say no to your idea without fully understanding your market, which is why I believe if you're a founder with grit that is working in a large target market that you think you understand better than any older person, if you're the target audience too, you should go ahead with your idea, right? You should go and give that idea your best shot possible, and maybe a few years later you'll thank me for it. Although one really weird trend that I'm noticing is that a lot of VCs are getting younger, right? A lot of partners and the deal flow guys are starting to get younger because it seems like these guys understand the world the best and are most connected with the biggest driver of change, the internet. Alright guys, that's it for this video. In the next video, I'm going to teach you how to make a pitch deck, whether it's actual storytelling or whether it's actual data storytelling. I'm going to help you make a pitch deck that runs you through the entire process. Don't forget to subscribe to me on YouTube and follow me on Instagram.